Tonight, over 280 federal agents raided multiple locations in a massive drug operation.
4:32 a.m., Minneapolis, Minnesota. Federal surveillance units had been tracking encrypted communications for 14 months. Messages coded in student aid language, transfers disguised as scholarship payments, a drug network operating beneath a university campus. More than 280 agents were about to move in. This story begins not with arrests, but with a warning that traveled across social media faster than anyone expected. A video that federal analysts couldn't ignore. A threat that would expose something far more dangerous than anyone imagined. If you want to see how deep this goes, hit like now. The first sign came on a Tuesday evening when a 22-year-old Somali student named Jamal Hersey uploaded a 47-second video to TikTok. His voice was calm, too calm. He spoke directly into the camera lens with precision that immediately caught attention. ICE thinks they can roll through Cedar Riverside without consequences, he said. Next time they come, I'll be ready. Bring your cavalry. I'll be waiting. The video spread to 340,000 views in 6 hours. Federal threat assessment teams flagged it within minutes, at a time when threats against immigration enforcement officers had increased 847% nationwide. Every statement carried operational weight. The difference between speech and action had become impossible to measure until it was too late. But when analysts cross-referenced Hersey's digital footprint with ongoing investigations, something unexpected appeared. His location data intersected with 17 addresses already under narcotics surveillance. His phone had pinged near 3 separate overdose emergency calls in the previous 8 weeks. His Venmo account showed 63 incoming payments labeled books and supplies totaling $1,400 in 4 months. None of it matched his student employment record. The threat wasn't just about immigration enforcement anymore. It was about what federal teams had been quietly tracking for over a year across Minneapolis's international academic corridor, a distribution network moving fentanyl and heroin through student housing complexes disguised behind scholarship programs and cultural assistance funds. Comment exposed if you believe the public needs to know this. The investigation had actually begun 11 months earlier, when a 19-year-old named Sarah Osman collapsed outside a student dormitory on the University of Minnesota's West Bank campus. Paramedics found her pulse barely detectable. Her lips were blue. Fentanyl overdose. She survived. But the pills found in her backpack led investigators somewhere they didn't expect. The substance wasn't street-grade fentanyl. It was pharmaceutical quality, pressed to look identical to legitimate prescription medication. Chemical analysis revealed a purity level of 91.3%, far higher than typical street distribution. Someone with access to laboratory equipment was producing this. Within 2 weeks, emergency room admissions for similar overdoses had spiked 340% in the Cedar Riverside and Seward neighborhoods surrounding the campus. 12 hospitalizations, 3 deaths, all involving students or young adults aged 18 to 24. The pattern was undeniable. Federal analysts began mapping every case, GPS data from victims' phones, financial transactions in the weeks before overdose, social connections on campus. What emerged was a network that didn't look like a typical street operation. It looked institutional. Investigators identified 28 individuals connected through student organizations, campus employment, and shared housing facilities. 12 had received payments through what appeared to be legitimate student aid programs. 7 worked in campus facilities with after-hours access. 4 had prior criminal records from other states that had somehow bypassed international student background checks. The money flow was even more disturbing. Bank records showed $6.8 million moving through 19 different accounts over 16 months. Small transfers, $200 here, $450 there, labeled as tuition assistance, community support, emergency funds. Each transaction stayed below federal reporting thresholds, but together they formed a financial highway, moving cash from street-level distribution back through seemingly legitimate nonprofit channels. One name appeared again and again in the records: Nuruddin Aden Osman, age 42, campus community liaison, advisor to 3 different international student organizations, trusted figure in Somali cultural program. Type yes if you're ready to see what happened next. Osman's background appeared clean on the surface. He had immigrated to the United States in 2003, became a citizen in 2009, worked in community outreach and student support services for over a decade. He attended city council meetings, spoke at scholarship ceremonies, posed for photographs with university administrators and local politicians. But federal financial investigators uncovered a second lie. Between January 2023 and November 2024, Osman's personal accounts received deposits totaling $7.9 million. The funds came from 47 different sources. Shell companies registered in Delaware and Nevada, cash businesses with no physical locations, cryptocurrency wallets tied to overseas exchanges, None of it matched his declared income of $52,000 per year. Travel records revealed frequent trips to Mexico City, Culiacan, and Guadalajara, cities known as operational centers for the Sinaloa Cartel and Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Phone records showed encrypted communications with numbers linked to known cartel logistics coordinators. The deeper analysts dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't a campus dealer selling pills to students. This was a cartel distribution coordinator using the university as protective cover, a logistics hub where young people, international students, and vulnerable community members were recruited as couriers, packagers, and street-level sellers. The campus wasn't the target of the operation, it was the foundation. By December 2024, federal surveillance had documented 143 separate incidents of suspected narcotics movement. Vehicles arriving at student housing between 2 a.m. and 4 p.m. Packages labeled educational materials moving through campus mail systems. Storage units rented under student names but accessed by individuals with no university affiliation. One basement storage room in a Cedar Riverside apartment building showed thermal signatures consistent with temperature-controlled pharmaceutical storage. Another location near the West Bank campus registered unusual electrical usage patterns matching those of pill press equipment. The evidence was overwhelming, but federal prosecutors wanted more than surveillance. They wanted dismantlement. They wanted every layer of the network exposed and prosecuted. That meant waiting, watching, building an airtight case that would withstand defense challenges. The operation was given a code name, Operation Academic Veil. Share this so more people understand what was hiding in plain sight. The order to move came on February 12, 2025 at 11:47 p.m. Over 280 agents from the FBI, DEA, ICE, and Minneapolis Police Department assembled at 3 staging locations across the city. Body armor checked, battering rams loaded, warrant packets verified. The raids would hit 14 locations simultaneously at 4:32 a.m. No one could be allowed to warn the others. No phones, no alerts, total communications blackout until every team was in position. At 4:30 a.m., engines started. Unmarked vehicles moved through darkness toward the West Bank campus, Cedar Riverside apartments, and off-campus housing scattered across South Minneapolis. Overhead, a DEA surveillance drone tracked thermal signatures. On the ground, sniper teams secured rooftop positions with clear sight lines to primary entry points. At 4:32 a.m., exactly, breaching teams moved. The first door came down at a 4-story apartment building on Cedar Avenue. The sound echoed through the pre-dawn silence. Agents poured through the opening, weapons raised, voices commanding. Federal agents, on the ground, hands where we can see them. Inside, 3 men scrambled for their phones. Too late. They were on the floor in seconds, zip-tied, faces pressed against cold linoleum. In the back bedroom, agents found what they came for: plastic bins stacked floor to ceiling, each one filled with thousands of counterfeit prescription pills, oxycodone, Xanax, Adderall, all pressed with fentanyl. Chemical testing would later confirm a total weight of 47.3 kilograms, enough for approximately 473,000 individual doses. Street value, $14.2 million. Simultaneously, teams hit a storage facility near the University of Minnesota campus. The unit had been rented under a student's name, but surveillance showed the student had never once accessed it. Instead, 3 different vehicles visited regularly, always between midnight and 5 a.m. When agents cut the lock and raised the door, they found something even more disturbing: a fully operational pill press, industrial-grade pharmaceutical equipment capable of producing 5,000 pills per hour. Beside it, drums of fentanyl precursor chemicals, binders, and dye compound, molds designed to replicate legitimate pharmaceutical tablets down to the logo imprints. This wasn't street-level dealing. This was manufacturing. If this shocks you, comment justice below. At the 3rd location, a house in the Seward neighborhood, resistance came immediately. As the battering ram struck the reinforced front door, gunfire erupted from a 2nd-story window. 3 rounds. Agents took cover behind vehicles. Shots fired! Shots fired! Tactical response was immediate. Flashbangs deployed through window. Smoke filled the interior. Within 90 seconds, entry teams breached from 2 sides simultaneously. 4 individuals inside surrendered without further resistance. A search revealed 2 semi-automatic handguns, 1 shotgun, and $340 in cash stored inside a bedroom closet. The bills were bundled in vacuum-sealed packages, organized by denomination. But the most important target was still ahead. Nuruddin Aiden Osman lived in a quiet residential area in Prospect Park neighborhood. His home was a modest 2-story house, well-maintained, with a small garden visible from the street. Nothing about it suggested criminal activity. Federal teams approached from 3 directions: front door, back entrance, garage access. At 4:39 a.m., they breached simultaneously. Osman was awake, sitting at a desk in his home office, laptop open, phone in hand. He looked up without surprise as agents flooded through the doorway. His expression was calm, almost resigned. "I've been expecting you," he said quietly. He was placed in custody without resistance. His laptop, phone, and 3 external hard drives were immediately seized. In the basement, agents found filing cabinets filled with ledgers documenting transactions dating back to 2019. Names, amounts, dates, delivery schedules. It was all there. Type exposed if you want to see what the evidence revealed. The seized devices contained a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. Over 840 encrypted messages detailing coordination between Osman and Cartel logistics personnel in Mexico. Financial spreadsheets tracking $18.7 million in transactions over 3 years. GPS coordinates marking drop locations across Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Rochester. But what shocked investigators most were the recruitment files. Osman had systematically targeted vulnerable individuals, international students facing financial hardship, young people with expired visas desperate to avoid deportation, community members struggling with addiction who could be controlled through dependency. He offered them help, scholarship funds, immigration assistance, emergency financial support. In exchange, they became part of the network. Couriers who believed they were transporting documents, students who thought they were helping with community fundraising, addicts who sold pills to feed their own habits. Many had no idea they were part of a cartel operation until federal agents knocked on their doors. The full scope of the network was staggering. Federal prosecutors identified 67 individuals directly involved in distribution, transportation, or financial laundering. An additional 34 people had unknowingly facilitated the operation through legitimate employment in campus services, postal facilities, or financial institutions. The network had moved an estimated 1.7 tons of fentanyl and heroin through Minneapolis over a 28-month period. Conservative estimates place the street value at over $340 million. Overdose deaths linked to the network, 29 confirmed, with another 41 under investigation. This wasn't just a criminal enterprise. It was a public health catastrophe disguised as community support. Share this video so more communities understand the threat. The raids also exposed something even more troubling: institutional vulnerability that allowed the network to operate undetected for so long. Background checks for international student organizations had gaps that Osman exploited. Campus mail systems lacked adequate screening for suspicious packages. Student financial aid programs relied on self-reporting that was never independently verified. The university had trusted community liaisons without conducting regular audits. Local nonprofits had accepted donations without questioning their sources. Banks had processed thousands of small transactions without triggering automated fraud detection. Every weak point had been identified and weaponized. Federal investigators also discovered that Osman wasn't acting alone in his coordination role. Encrypted communications revealed references to another figure, identified only as the broker in messages. This person never appeared in surveillance footage, never made direct contact with street-level operatives, but their instructions appeared repeatedly in Osman's communications. The broker says, "Proceed with Friday delivery." The broker approved the new route. The broker wants tighter security on the Cedar location. Financial analysis suggested this individual controlled the flow of cartel funds into legitimate business fronts, shell companies that appeared to operate legal import-export businesses, real estate investments, and consulting services. But beneath the surface, they were laundering tens of millions in drug proceeds. Federal authorities believe the broker is still active, still coordinating, still operating somewhere within the network's broader infrastructure. The investigation is ongoing. Comment "ongoing" if you believe they need to find everyone involved. The community response was immediate and devastating. For students attending classes on the West Bank campus, the revelation that their campus had been used as a drug distribution hub was incomprehensible. For Somali community leaders, it was a betrayal that cut deep. Osman had been a trusted figure, someone who represented their community at public events, who advocated for immigrant rights, who mentored young people. Now his name was connected to 29 deaths and a cartel operation. Parents who had sent their children to Minneapolis for education demanded answers. How had this happened? Why hadn't the university detected it? What protections existed to prevent it from happening again? University administrators held emergency meetings. New security protocols were announced. Background check procedures were overhauled. Campus police presence was increased. But for many, the damage was already done. Trust had been shattered. The campus that was supposed to be a place of learning and opportunity had become a crime scene. International students faced increased scrutiny. Somali community members reported feeling stigmatized by association with Osman's crimes. The ripple effects extended far beyond law enforcement statistics. Longtime residents of Cedar Riverside spoke of a neighborhood transformed by fear. Elderly community members who had once felt safe walking to morning prayers now hesitated. Families who had built lives in Minneapolis over decades questioned whether they still belonged. The network hadn't just trafficked drugs, it had poisoned trust. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next in this investigation. Federal prosecutors moved quickly to file charges. Nuruddin Aden Osman faced 17 federal counts, including conspiracy to distribute fentanyl, money laundering, operating a continuing criminal enterprise, and firearms violations. If convicted on all counts, he faces a mandatory minimum sentence of life in prison without possibility of parole. 23 co-defendants were also indicted. Charges ranged from distribution and transportation to financial facilitation and conspiracy. Bail was denied for 19 of them, based on flight risk and danger to the community. The evidence presented in preliminary hearings was overwhelming. Surveillance footage, intercepted communications, forensic accounting record, testimony from cooperating witnesses who agreed to testify in exchange for reduced sentences. Defense attorneys argued that many of the lower-level defendants were victims themselves, manipulated by Osman, threatened with deportation or harm to their families. They claimed their clients had no knowledge they were participating in a cartel operation. Federal prosecutors acknowledged that some defendants deserved leniency, but they emphasized that the network's damage was real. 29 people were dead. Hundreds more had suffered overdoses. Communities had been devastated. Justice required accountability at every level. The trial is scheduled to begin in September 2025. It's expected to last 4 to 6 months given the volume of evidence and number of defendants. But even as the legal process unfolds, investigators continue to pursue the broker. Financial forensics teams are analyzing offshore accounts, tracing cryptocurrency transactions, and mapping shell company ownership structures. Every digital breadcrumb is being followed, every financial connection investigated. Federal officials believe the broker operates from outside Minnesota, possibly outside the United States. But they're confident the investigation will eventually identify them. "We will find everyone involved in this network," a DEA spokesperson stated at a press conference. "No matter how long it takes, no matter where they hide, if you believe justice is worth fighting for, hit like now." This case represents something larger than one network in one city. It exposes how sophisticated drug trafficking organizations have evolved. They no longer rely solely on violence and intimidation. They exploit institutions. They weaponize trust. They hide behind legitimacy. Osman used his position in the community as a shield. The university campus provided operational cover. Student aid programs were turned into money laundering channels. Vulnerable immigrants became unwilling participants. This is the new face of cartel operations in America. Invisible until it's too late. Embedded in communities. Protected by the very trust that makes communities function. And it's happening in cities across the country. Federal data shows similar patterns emerging in college towns from Boston to Seattle. Urban universities with large international student populations, communities with established immigrant networks, cities where nonprofit organizations operate with minimal oversight. Cartels have identified these environments as ideal distribution corridors, high demand from young adult populations, transient residents who don't attract attention, financial systems designed for flexibility rather than security. Operation Academic Veil may have dismantled one network, but investigators believe dozens more are operating across the United States. The fight is far from over. Share this story before it disappears. For the families who lost loved ones to this network, no arrest can bring back what was taken. Sarah Chen, 20, aspiring medical student. Marcus Williams, 22, engineering major. Amina Hassan, 19, first-generation college student. 29 names, 29 futures ended, 29 families destroyed. Their deaths were not accidents. They were not the result of personal choices made in isolation. They were the direct result of a criminal network that prioritized profit over human life. A network that manufactured pills designed to look safe. That targeted the vulnerable and exploited the desperate. That operated with cold precision behind a mask of community service. This is what institutional betrayal looks like, when those who are supposed to protect communities instead prey on them, when positions of trust become weapons, when help becomes harm. For investigators who spent months building this case, the raids were only the beginning. The real work now is preventing this from happening again, identifying the vulnerabilities, closing the gaps, building systems that can detect these operations before they claim more lives. But that requires acknowledgement of an uncomfortable truth. The systems designed to support students, help immigrants, and strengthen communities were turned against those very people. Not because the systems were inherently flawed, but because they were built on trust without adequate verification. Moving forward requires balance, supporting vulnerable populations while maintaining security, preserving the openness that makes academic communities thrive while preventing exploitation. It's not an easy balance, but it's a necessary one. Comment vigilance if you believe communities must stay alert. As this case moves through the legal system, one question continues to haunt investigators. How many other networks are operating right now, undetected, in communities across America? How many other trusted community figures are living double lives? How many other campuses are being used as distribution corridors? How many other vulnerable young people are being recruited into operations they don't understand? The answer is unknowable, but the warning is clear. Vigilance is not suspicion. Verification is not discrimination. Oversight is not oppression. These are the tools that prevent exploitation. These are the safeguards that protect communities. The network that operated beneath the Minneapolis campus survived for years because people didn't want to believe it could happen. Because questioning community leaders felt like betrayal. Because investigating assistance programs seemed cruel. But the real cruelty was allowing the network to continue. Every day it operated, more people died, more families were destroyed, more trust was eroded. The lesson is painful but essential. Safety requires both compassion and scrutiny, support and verification, trust and accountability. One without the other creates the vulnerabilities that networks like Osmond's are designed to exploit. If you believe this message needs to reach more people, share this video now. The investigation continues. Federal agents are still tracking financial leads, still interviewing witnesses, and still building cases against individuals who facilitated the network. The broker remains unidentified, but investigators believe they're getting closer. Every transaction analyzed, every communication decrypted, every connection mapped. Eventually, the pattern will reveal the person behind it, and when it does, another operation will launch. More raids, more arrests, another piece of the network dismantled. This is the reality of fighting modern drug trafficking. Not a single dramatic takedown, but a continuous battle fought in ledgers and data logs, in surveillance footage and financial records. Unsexy, tedious, essential. For the 280 agents who participated in Operation Academic Veil, the raids were the culmination of 14 months of painstaking work. Thousands of hours of surveillance, mountains of financial analysis, constant risk. They faced gunfire. They witnessed devastation. They saw firsthand what these networks do to communities. And they'll do it again tomorrow, in another city, against another network, because the work is never finished. Hit like to honor the agents who risk everything to protect our communities. This story began with a video threat from a student. It ended with the exposure of a multi-million-dollar cartel operation. In between, it revealed uncomfortable truths about trust, vulnerability, and the systems designed to protect us. Nuruddin Aden Osman awaits trial. 23 co-defendants prepare their defenses. 29 families mourn their dead. And somewhere, the broker continues to operate. The question isn't whether networks like this exist. The question is whether we're willing to do what's necessary to find them before they claim more lives. Vigilance is protection. Verification is compassion. Oversight is security. These aren't political positions. They're survival imperatives. The Minneapolis campus is quiet again. Students attend classes. Life continues. But beneath the surface, investigators continue their work, following leads, building cases, hunting the next network. Because this story isn't over. It's only the beginning. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of this investigation. Comment your thoughts below. Share this story with everyone who needs to know the truth. The fight against trafficking organizations hiding in our communities continues. And it won't stop until every network is exposed and every architect brought to justice. This is the new reality. This is the threat. This is why we can never stop watching.